Okay, ready? 3, 2, 1, action! Hiya, I'm Aya, and we're gonna review Pokemon Stadium. That's right, Pokemon Stadium for the Nintendo 64. It is a competitive battle game for the first generation on the Game Boy Color cartridges. It is on the Nintendo 64, which now is obsolete. If you still have one, great. If you don't, that's okay. The Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack has Pokemon Stadium 1 and 2. So if you want to go back and play them, now you can. Before we do anything, and I mean anything, let's go ahead and watch a promotional video of Pokemon Stadium.
A battle looms over this place. It's a battle for destiny, a battle for glory, a battle for
Pokemon Stadium.
Yeah.
The place to prove you're the ultimate Pokemon trainer. You can upload your Game Boy Pokemon on your N64.
There you go.
Then, for the first time ever, battle in 3D.
Then a conquering hero is raised to
Awesome. Okay, that makes me feel a lot better. All right, now that we've seen that, there's a reason why I wanted to show you that. Because we need to talk about something very important. And that is because what is Pokemon Stadium? Well, it is actually a video game that came out for the Nintendo 64 to basically be an add-on to the Game Boy games by having the transfer pack, where you could slap your Game Boy game into it and then you could use the Pokemon from your games in Pokemon Stadium. Well, it is 2024. We do not have this option anymore. Since the Switch doesn't have any of the Gen 1 or Gen 2 games ported onto it, and there is no transfer pack type of thing to slap your Game Boy cartridge in there, you can't play this game to its fullest. Which is its downfall. Even IGN has this little thing on their review where it says, no, Pokemon Stadium is not much of a standalone game. If you don't own Pokemon for the Game Boy, it doesn't make sense to invest $60 to play the game that shows its best features only when a Game Boy cartridge is plugged in. The whole thing about this game is it has the features that you can basically continue your Game Boy game in your Nintendo 64. Pretty cringe. Pretty cringe. Since we have Nintendo Online with the new expansion pack, yeah, sure, we can play it, but you can only play certain parts of it. So you can play the mini games, you can play the stadium part, but you can't play the Game Boy Tower. Back in the day, you would slap in your Game Boy cartridge, go to the tower, you defeat them, and you get one of 8 Pokemon, which could be a way to help fill out your deck if you didn't have friends to trade with, or a link cable, or whatever. You could also store Pokemon from your cartridge in Pokemon Stadium, and clearly your Pokemon that you've been raising and training in your Game Boy game are probably better than basically every rental Pokemon that you can possibly get in this game. Is it still fun? I think so. You know, we've played a bit. Rental Pokemon aside, it's still fun. I think it's a very good intro to competitive VGC. So back in the day, this was kind of I feel like an intro for a lot of people. Obviously, VGC now is double battles and, formatted differently because we're using the Switch. This was a good intro for kids, and especially in Gen 1, it was a lot harder. Using rentals only is very limiting. And we'll talk about this more when I get to more of the game controls and gameplay stuff, because obviously when we do retro view, we have different sections for different things. Like story, for example, there is none. There's zero story. There is no story to Pokemon Stadium. That is it. It is not a story-based game. It doesn't have a story. It is an add-on to your Game Boy Color games, which is red, blue, and yellow. As for graphics and sound, of course, we have the 2000 low poly, things, I guess. Honestly, from all the low poly games that you could have, the Pokemon still look like the Pokemon they're supposed to. They actually did a really good job replicating them. The animations are great. They all have unique animations. Each move has an animation that makes sense to what it is. Like Surf, you get a wave and you ride it. Bubble Beam, you have the bubbles that pop out. Each move has an animation that makes sense. So that's really cool. Every Pokemon is, 3D and has its own animation, which is cool. And I think that they were very well thought out. Sound, they play your nostalgic typical Pokemon music from the Game Boy games. So it's sticking to the theme, which is what we love, right? So sound and graphics, not bad. I would say pretty solid. The controls and gameplay is where it gets, bad. Because you can only play it on the Nintendo Switch expansion pack unless you own an N64 with the game cartridge still. It doesn't tell you how the controls ported from your N64 controller into your what I was playing on a Pro Switch controller. You might be playing on like the Switch itself or with Joy-Cons, but it doesn't tell you how those controls translate. Now there's not a lot to control in this game. It is a turn-based battle style, but it was really interesting because you have your A, B, X, Y, right? And then to select Pokemon and moves, it said arrows that go up, down, left, right. Those controls are on your right stick. So it took a while to figure out, well, which one, because I have 2 sticks and a D-pad, and it wasn't the D-pad, which I would have expected it to be, but it was not. So it's a little confusing at first, but once you get the hang of it, it's pretty simple, right? And turn-based battles, simple. There are mini games, which I think is nice to have something to break up the monotony of continuing to battle and battle and battle over and over again. They have different cups, so you have a variety of types of battles you can do. You can have a limitation on evolutions, you have a limitation on levels, limitation on types of Pokemon or whatever, which I thought was good. The competitive side where you can only bring 3 in was really cool that they had that. And then we have to go back to the fact that without the Game Boy, you are not able to play the full game. So it's really sad that nothing was ported with the Switch expansion pack version that you could play the Game Boy Tower with. So part of the game and most of the online reviews, such as like IGN, some Reddit posts that I've seen, and the biggest thing that it was advertised for and that people were excited for and their favorite part is the Game Boy Tower. Without the Game Boy transfer pack, you are not able to do parts of the game. You can't battle anybody. You can't, couch gaming, which was part of it. You could actually do that. So it's kind of limited. You're limited on your Pokemon to rentals, which have poor stats, weird move sets, and it's just playing the game on hard mode, which is fine. People like to challenge themselves, and that kind of goes into the replayability, right? So we have play with rentals only as a challenge. You could change your rental teams and replay it and see how you do in the stadium then. They have a lot of Pokemon, but they're different and they're not as good as your homebrew. I played my Game Boy game, my Pokemon Yellow, and I have a level 100 Mewtwo and I'm going to annihilate everybody. You can't have that, sorry. So yep, there's that. When it comes to replayability, I think you could probably do it 1 or 2, maybe a couple times, more than that. But as for without the Game Boy transfer pack, is it really worth playing that many times? Probably not for most people, right? I would say overall, with my opinion on the game, I like it. I think it was well thought out. I think it's a nice add-on to the original games. As a standalone game, I don't think it's very good because you can't play it now. Not the whole game, at least, I did find it challenging that the rental Pokemon are, rentals, and they have weird move pools and, Gen 1 mechanics. So there's that. I think that the limitations are too steep without the Game Boy transfer pack. And so therefore, I don't think that it stood the test of time. Is it a fun, hey, let me go casually, just play it because I have the expansion pack already? Sure. Would you go out and buy the expansion pack just for this? Probably not. Considering that the main feature is the Game Boy transfer stuff, this game is no longer a very viable choice to play. And that's really sad, in my opinion. Because I love Pokemon. I think that Pokemon Stadium is awesome and would love a way to maybe if they ported Gen 1, Gen 2 onto the Switch and then be like, oh, well, if you have it on here, you can transfer it to here. That would be cool. I think that would be probably the best. If they obviously have the Game Boy on the expansions for Nintendo, since we already have the Game Boy on the Switch, we could have the first and second generation ported to it, and we could have some way to transfer them, which would make this game so much better. But until that happens, or if that ever does happen, this game did not stand the test of time. Unfortunately, I'm gonna have to kick it to the bucket. What do you think about this game? Did you play it? Do you still play it? Would you agree or disagree with my review of the game? I want to know. Also, if you want me to do a review of any other retro game, please comment on the YouTube video below because I'm always looking for your suggestions to broaden our retro view episodes. Thank you!